Jayashree.
Welcome to the conversation. We're talking about the OMR, a stretch from probably Taramani to infinity, but we'll mostly up to Sholinganallur, I think, is where most of the active projects are happening, and a little beyond. Right? So actually, the driver for this was that there's a lot of consumer interest around this entire stretch, the IT corridor of Chennai. And since all of you have heavily invested into that corridor, we thought let's talk to the consumer and find out what are the things that you must consider before you buy a property in along the OMR. First, let's talk about OMR as a destination. So, Gaurav, would you like to start?
See, I think we'll keep it probably 1 minute for every person so that everybody gets a chance. Personally, I think, one of the most redeeming things about OMR, of course, the fact that it's a large office corridor where a lot of the IT work happens. But I think residential realty, whenever a person is considering buying, the social infrastructure that is in a particular location becomes critical for anybody to decide. And I think that is where OMR really wins handsomely, because whether it is hospitals, whether it is theaters, whether it is schools, whether restaurants, the entire social infrastructure is so well built now in OMR that it truly fulfills your work, and your work-life balance is filled in very nicely, because you have the ability at some level to work, walk to work, as well as all the social infrastructure that one needs, right? So it has almost become a completely like a self-contained community to a large degree, where if people today live in OMR, they virtually don't need to come to Madras for anything if they don't want to, right? So today, and the beach is close by. So from a entire ecosystem, I think OMR has got developed like a fantastic ecosystem for all sorts of residential opportunities, whether it is from a single bedroom of a 600 square foot unit, or if you're looking to large villas or large villa apartments sort of a thing, the entire spectrum, say from 30 lakhs to 3.5, 4 crore rupees, the entire spectrum for the customer is very, very well served on all accounts.
Okay, I'm going to go to Rahul. Rahul, if there's somebody considering a beach apartment in Chennai, you would look at maybe the ECR, the OMR, two parallel roads. How does one select between the two? What are the relative merits and demerits of both?
So yeah, in terms of development in OMR, as Gaurav sir also said, there has been a big social infrastructure and everything. So I kind of see this ribbon development that's happening where close to the main roads there are better developments that has happened. And so as you move more and more outside of the main roads, you have a lot of untapped potentials. So any buyer who, as you said, willing to purchase any property or a flat or apartment, so preferably try to get one of those that is better developed, where he has access to all the amenities, all the infrastructure, like how close is a school nearby, a hospital nearby, or a hotel nearby, and all that. So as Gaurav sir also mentioned, it's already it's already a self-sustaining ecosystem. You don't even have to go to the city. So these are some of the areas. Preferably, any person, since it is kind of like the IT corridor of Chennai, people who want to move there are preferably IT professionals who want to, be closer to the workplace so that they don't have to, they avoid the hassle of commuting. So I would say in terms of selecting a location, they would preferably go somewhere where there's better infrastructure, which is almost everywhere. But as you go more outside that ribbon, there's little untapped potential. So it's up and coming, it's again growing. But yeah, there is probably one area that consumers can look at.
You're on mute. Jayashree, you're on mute.
Yes, I'm unmuted now. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. So we've heard what Rahul Ramaswamy, Director Bhagyam, and Gaurav Goenka of MD Adroit had to say. Now I'm going to come to Arun Kumar, his MD of Casa Grand. Arun, let's talk about the connectivity. One of the big pluses of the OMR is its connectivity. Would you like to elaborate on that?
See, let's understand actually OMR's origin happened because primarily the the OMR per se as a road development which happened which happened about 7 to 8 years back. Doesn't it more or less got reasonably completed? And from then on, that's been an important feeder road into this whole infrastructure. IT companies which have gotten developed in this road. So that's been the primary thing. But what's happening now is obviously with the metro being taken up very seriously in Chennai, though with a little bit of a delay, which could happen. And the feeder roads like Thorapakam Pallavaram road, which feeds into this road, like the ECR road, which again comes and feeds into the road, makes the whole, road and the corridor per se extremely well connected in terms of road infrastructure. And if the train and metro corridors were to come in quickly in the next about 4 to 5 years also, kind of a timeline, I think as Gaurav was mentioning, it becomes a world by its own. You really do not have to really come to any of the other part of Chennai. In fact, I don't want to call it city anymore, because actually OMR is a city by itself then, and you don't have to come. The best of infrastructure is available. So people who work there can live there, and hence the internal connectivities become more relevant within them than possibly them having to necessarily connect all the way to the so-called yesteryear city, which is, I would think that is what it will become, because Chennai will become the south part of Chennai and the rest of Chennai. That's the way it's going to become. Though the south part of Chennai, people might want to see it as starting from the Ginti, Kattipar onwards, OMR and the southeastern side, both sides. The eastern corridor, which includes the ECR OMR. ECR is very small. I don't think you can really compare an ECR to OMR. In an earlier question, I just saw that coming. So ECR is very small. ECR OMR and the southeastern corridor, which is the GST. Everything starting from Ginti onwards to that side is going to be one part of the city and the most happening part of the Chennai city. And rest is going to be together in one bucket. So that's the way the city is going to evolve. So it's going to be connectivity within that, in terms of road infrastructure, local transports to be it metro coming in, etc. I think it will be very well served, and that will possibly make life easy for people who live in.
Now I'm going to go to Sanjay. Sanjay, we've all spoken about different aspects of the OMR. It is actually a community, right? And as senior VP and city head of Chennai for Canara Rock, maybe your overview would be very critical. Who buys here? What is the average age group that lives here? What are the kind of properties that are selling here? Give us an overview of the
Sure. Thanks, Jayashree. So when we started selling OMR, this was sometime in the year 2005 to 2010, it was more focused on the IT workforce, which is getting employed there, and that was creating an opportunity for housing. But if you look at what's happened over the last 8-10 years, OMR has also attracted a lot of people who actually are from southern part of Chennai, not necessarily working on the IT, but because of the affordability in terms of the pricing. Second, like Gaurav as well as Arun said about this infrastructure, which improved over a period of time. Today you have a shopping mall, you have 2 of them, you have a decent road to drive on, you have enough of high street shopping, there's enough of ecosystem which is built on OMR. So today it is no longer OMR, it is like a southern extension of the city. And that is exactly what today people perceive it as. So earlier it was more to do with IT and ITES, but today it is becoming more and more to do with lifestyle, larger communities, more amenities, because that kind of land parcel we don't have in the city. So today the millennial, the new generation is looking at homes, especially in today's context where people have to be in community living, these kind of larger apartment complexes would have so many amenities, clubhouses, swimming pool, which we really don't have in the CBD of Chennai. That is moving, and that's attracting a lot of people to move towards that side. And like Arun pointed out about the new infrastructure, the metro rail and the elevated road, which is going to come in the next 3 to 5 years, I think that is what is really driving people to move to the south, and specifically to OMR, because it has, if you look at Ananagar on one side, the western part of Chennai has a huge infrastructure by itself. It's an ecosystem built in. So people who live there don't want to go out. Similarly, I find the same thing in OMR as well, where people who are actually staying there over the last 2-3 years have been used to being there. They really don't want to come back into the main city, which is more denser in terms of population, more traffic congestion. And if work is close by, why not? The schools, some of the best schools you have, hotels have come up, all the top branded hotels are there, the shopping mall has come up. So why not OMR?
I'm going to go back to Gaurav. Gaurav, the COVID lockdown has changed equations, the buying equations across India. Help me understand what's happened in Chennai and specifically.
See, I personally, I would like to address this question a little differently. Right? Actually, I think the COVID situation has really tilted the balance into buying of residential units. And I'll come back because, see, today, if one thing a person has understood during lockdown is ki ghar apna hai. This, my home is my only true friend and my asset at this point in time. Nobody can take it away from me. It is there for me, myself. It protects me. It gives me the comfort that is needed, right? People had started looking at a home as something which was optional, right? I think one of the biggest changes that COVID has brought about is the permanence in people's thought that if there is one asset in my life that I need to own and I need to own it properly, is my home, right? So that, I think, this realization, right? And especially, we have a millennial Rahul with us, right? Because there was so much discussion all around that millennials prefer to rent versus buy, right? All the millennials and the people older to him today realize the value of a home. So I think COVID actually might be a massive kicker, right? Much to our, contrary to our expectation, where people's fundamental approach to their home and housing has changed forever, actually.
So Rahul, what are the dimensions of the house? What are the ticket sizes that are currently doing well?
So I can maybe talk about the projects that we are currently doing. So we're doing one in Thoraipakkam, which is about 79 apartments. So it has 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and 4 bedrooms. So generally, ticket sizes are, say, a 2-bedroom apartment would be like 1,200 square feet. 3-bedroom would be 1,500. 4-bedroom would be 1,800. So there are ranges. So these are basically, so depending upon the size and the requirements and the comfortability and everything. So that is what I believe the end buyers would finally look at. So if it's a spacious apartment, obviously it's going to cost more. But I mean, some people prefer having a spacious apartment. So even a 2-bedroom apartments, some of the apartments that we've done are going to about 1,500 when it should be a little lower. So this is general range. The 1-bedroom would be a smaller size. So specific to our flat, since we have it a little spacious design, a concept in mind, and we design based on that. So these are generally the sizes that we have in our apartments, which is pretty much the standard everywhere. I think Android and Casa Grande, most of the apartment sizes are in and around the same ranges that I can see.
Arun, the demand is coming from newer buyers, first-time buyers, or is it more from upgrade buyers? Because suddenly, like Gaurav said, you've changed the definition of home, right? Home was something that you lived away from it for 8 to 12 hours. You came back and then you came into home. Suddenly you're working here, you're working, your spouse is working, children are here, in-laws, parents, everybody is here, your dog, your cat, whatever. So suddenly the definition of a home has changed. Are you seeing a lot of upgrade demand as well? And what about first-time home buyers?
I still think the origin of demand, the primary origin of demand is from the first-time buyers. You have to understand that India is still a lot behind. Huge population which still have been in rented homes, who just moved from maybe smaller tenements and so on and so forth. There's a huge population which is trying to buy their first home, which could be in the price range of as low as 20-25 lakhs to as high as even 70-80 lakhs, or maybe even a little more, I would say. So the biggest demand driver in India for the next 10 years for sure is going to be from the first-time home buyers. No doubt, obviously, people who have had the wealth to afford homes about 5 years, 10 years back, etc. No doubt, the economy is done very well. India has obviously grown quite a bit. Forget about the last 2 years of economic slump and a COVID impact, etc. But by and large, what India is one of the best stories in the world. Given that being the case, actually everybody's earned enough wealth that they have wanted to move from their earlier home of maybe a 2-bedroom maybe it's say inside the city, etc., to something more swanky. Let's say we do a lot of 4-bedroom projects and 5 bedrooms and maybe more fancier projects with better amenities, very classy, etc. And those kind of projects they're willing to move, which prices could move to about 1.2 crores or 1.1 crore or 1.4 crores. So people do want to graduate to that. But I would think that the contribution could be by and large, I'm not very sure as a number, but let me put a number to it from my own logic. The first time home buyer would contribute 50 to 60%. The upgrade home buyers could contribute next 20, 30%, 40%, 20% or 30%. And 10% could come from, 10 to 20% will come from predominantly investors who are trying to buy it for renting out purposes. Okay, that's by and large the breakup which it would be. That's what I see. But yeah, this is where the demand is coming from.
Sanjay, when you talk about the OMR, it has all of you have referred to its connectivity. You've referred to its social infrastructure, the fact that there are schools, hospitals, entertainment centers, and so on. It's like a ecosystem by itself. First of all, I want you to build on what Arun said about the ticket sizes. What are the ticket sizes that you at Anarock are seeing along the OMR? And also, how significant is this social infrastructure when it comes to the establishment of a corridor?
So Jayeshi, to answer your query, the first ticket size that we see, the primary ticket size, is a sweet spot between 30 lakhs to 60 lakhs. That is the first band where people, like Arun said, the first home buyer is looking to buy something. So he has a certain constraint on how much he can spend for the first home. So that is a 30 to 60 lakh band. Going to say 60 or 90 or 60 to 100 is where the upgrade happens, where people are looking at moving, say, from a 2-bedroom to a 3-bedroom, or from a 3-bedroom compact to a 3-bedroom larger apartment, more amenities. And the 1 crore plus is where the third band is. So 1 to 1.5, where you really want to go and explore a larger community, a larger apartment, better facilities, an extra room today, especially in the context of work from home. So that is where the third set of things. So it's 30 to 60, the 60 to 100, and maybe 100 to 150. So these are the three segments. Coming back, to your second question on how important the social infrastructure is. Yes, it is important, because to create people's home buying decision primarily rests on two things. Apart from the LSP that we say, location, size, and price, it's about the school or your workplace. If you look at a priority, it's more to do with schooling first. Second is your workplace. Then third comes your size and your look and your budgeting. Having said that, I think OMR today, fortunately, has some of the best schools. Healthcare, many hospitals have opened up. Last couple of years, 3-4 years, you're seeing every year 2 to 3 large hospitals opening up. So you have schools, you have hospitals, and you have workplaces. So all of it combined, it comes down as a fantastic package, especially when you're looking at where do you look. So today, if I'm a migrant and I'm coming into Chennai and I really want to settle down, I like the city, where do I go and buy, where I get all of these? So this will certainly qualify as one corridor, which actually has all of these trappings.
Gaurav, I'm going to drill a little deeper and say that we talked about a corridor. Let's drill down to the localities. A first-time home buyer, which Arun estimates is about 60% of the buyers. How do you decide on your locality? What are do you have any rule of thumb?
Do you have any?
Rule of thumb that it should be near your school, hospital?
See, I think it plays out differently for different people. But certainly school, work, I would say certainly school, work, and affordability, right, plays a clear role. And of course, starting from, say, if you were to start from Taramani and go down to Navalu, where a bulk of the housing in OMR today would be sitting there. Plus, so I think the choices between Taramani and, say, Navalu, right? I know we were talking about up to Sholingalur, but up to Navalur, I would say, in terms of affordability, all sizes are available for people, whether it is, buying a 600 square feet apartment or whether it's buying a 4,000 square feet villa or villa apartment, whatever, right? So I think one is affordability. Second is definitely, how much time you want your kids to travel by school, right? If you have older parents, maybe hospitals are a consideration of some sort. Entertainment is a consideration. So today I would say that price and availability of the product that you're looking for helps you decide between where you are looking, where you will choose between, say, Taramani and Navalu. needless to say that every developer, every development has its plus and minuses appeal to an individual. Certain things appeal to certain people, right? So that always plays as an underlying role play for any choices that you're making.
Rahul, when you talk about the current demand, is it for under construction or is it for completed, or is there a ratio that you can get between?
Generally, people prefer to move into a ready-to-move-in apartment. Especially with this COVID situation, there are talks of a lot of NRIs that might come into the country. So they are looking for so there's a wave that people try to catch there when they try to get into a readily available apartment. So I would say a lot of the demand would be for completed, finished, ready-to-move-in apartments. And people who obviously it depends upon their own future planning and everything. So with this COVID situations, people think there's also a mindset that real estate would be a very good investment. So for that, they would try to go for bank loans and everything, go for part payment installments, and go for an under construction apartment where they don't actually need to move in right away, thinking it as an point of view. So they try to catch in the early wave and everything. I would say ready to move in apartment has a better demand, just from my humble experience. But yeah.
A follow-up question to you: how do you, as a developer, cope with that? Because I think this is the trend that we've noticed across India. And as developers, are you able to complete and sell, or the process has normally been that you start launching and selling, but suddenly there is an enhanced demand for completed apartments? How do you cope with that?
So yeah, again, so the usual procedure we follow is after we do all the legal aspects, do the RERA registration and everything, and we launch. And then we do like a model apartment or something and try to sell it as early as possible. Try to do some amount of booking, maybe like 20-30% of the booking to help us with the fund flow. But again, in this situation, this is kind of unprecedented time. So if you don't have a completed ready to move in apartments and you want to complete it as soon as possible, I think that depends upon how the situation kind of turns out. Obviously, because of this lockdown and everything and the labor shortage and availability, it is not actually that easy to actually quickly complete it. So I would say, only time would probably tell how we can manage that aspect of it. But I mean, with good marketing, there's definitely demand, and the situation is only going to improve in the months. So I think that would probably help ease the situation a little bit.
Arun, is the real estate industry in Chennai also facing a resource crunch? There has been a total shutdown of the industry. Restarting is a problem, right? And also across regions, developers have been saying that capital adequacy has been an issue. Have you seen banks reluctant to lend?
See, it's too early to judge. Any of our lending institutions where there's a prior commitment, nobody's gone back on it. They all have said we'll honor it. Just that as soon as we all open, even in Mumbai, Mumbai is on a shutdown mode, and all the funding institutions are predominantly there, except for a few banks who could fund low, which could be locally present, or any branch office of a funding institution, which is very, by and large, very small number. So I am not seeing them rolling it back. But there are talks that one or two guys could find it difficult to fund further, and they might possibly stall it. But I've really not had a first-hand experience, considering the fact that we have a reasonably big loan book. We have close to 1,000 crore kind of a loan book. So we know very well what you're talking. So I don't see anybody really going back on it. Maybe for newer land acquisition proposals, would they immediately venture out to cutting checks or something, we might have to see. But any of the committed earlier term sheets or maybe loans disbursed and further loans, etc., I don't see any. We've had a bigger issue earlier with the IL&FS crisis, and that is what we've sailed through. COVID will not be a very big reason as to why any of the funding institutions will stop. So I'm not very worried about it. So that will not be the crunch. In fact, when you say resource crunch, I was really thinking you were talking about the labor. Because what's happened, all the laborers have gone back to their respective towns, etc. They all are going to come back. They can't survive there for too long. Government can pay for 1 or 2 months of their survival. After that, they'll come back. But that could take the 3-4 months timeline for things to settle. So a lot of projects obviously are going to be delayed. in a fair sense, even if the builder developer tries to do his best, it might be delayed. That's the crunch. Because what happens? Already we've carried a idle overhead for the last 3 months. Already we've carried through an interest cost for the last 3 months. Unproductive interest costs and HR costs. But now, if the construction now comes in full swing because of labor not being available, that's going to lead to obviously another 2 to 3 months of further idling. So that all these things is going to obviously hit the bottom line and squeeze the builder quite a bit is what I'm seeing. That's what I'm seeing this to be. Otherwise, funding institutions as a resource concern, I think money will come by. I don't see it being a big issue now.
I've seen UP making lists of the returnees actually at the quarantine centers, mapping skills, working with the construction industry and saying, can we repurpose the returned migrant labor and give them jobs here? Is the same happening in Chennai, or can it happen in Chennai? Have you had enough returnees?
We don't have any local labor only. In Chennai, it's only about 15% is being a local labor. Everybody else is from Bihars and UPs and Andhra and different part of the country. Only those guys will have to come. Let them please come. Let UP not retain them. I'm saying these are all nice stories to build. Construction industry is the second largest employer in the country, and that's why we are not so mechanized. The country should be appreciating us that we are not so mechanized, that we're still losing labor, because of which there is livelihood for so many people. So let them send people back and let's get on with our business. See, nothing really has to change post-COVID. I don't think really, I'll tell you one perspective from where I come from. No doubt this is a serious impact. It's unknown, days and how things are going to be, etc. But I very strongly believe that it will just get back to the normalcy of how it was. All the efficiencies which are there prior will flow through. All the inefficiencies which were there prior will also flow through. So nothing really is going to change big per se because of this is my humble view. And ultimately productivity, everybody have to go back to earn. I'm very surprised that these laborers who've gone are surviving more than 1 or 2 months. They'll have to come back. Yeah, they're all earning 20K, 25K per month or more, and they were sending this money back home. How will the family sustain without this money? That's not possible. They have to come back. Everything has to get back to normalcy.
Before I go to Sanjay, I'm going to come
COVID.
back. Yeah.
I'm saying COVID, it has to come back normalcy.
Absolutely. Before I come to Sanjay, I'm going to go back to Gaurav and say, Gaurav, I'd like your perspective also on the migrant labor. Is there, as an industry, as such, Tamil Nadu real estate industry, are you making any efforts to bring the labor back?
See, I think a couple of things, right? The migrant labor issue, right? There are multiple things how we should look at, right? There are two kinds of migrant labor in this country. One is the migrant labor that moves with the family, that basically comes from, say, MP and Orissa, the deep parts of Madhya Pradesh and Orissa, right? And there is the other kinds of migrant labor who come from UP, Bihar, and say Bengal, so on and so forth, right? See, personally, if all these states had phenomenal opportunities right from the start, right, these people won't have migrated, because both these, say, especially UP and Bihar, right, these are such largely populous states, right, that even if the governments of these states try to find opportunities for these people, it is unlikely that in a short span of time they can find opportunities for, say, 7 to 8 crore people who come from these states, right? 12 crore, 13 crore is the migrant population in these areas, right? It is unlikely that in such a short span of time that these governments can create such phenomenal opportunity. Secondly, if you look at Tamil Nadu, it's a rich state, it's a prosperous state, and it's an industrious state, right? And that is why I think that the opportunity anyways exists in the underlying conditions that the state of Tamil Nadu presents for its population. So I think personally, all these people, it's a matter of time, as Arun was saying, right? Whether it's 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, whatever have you, right? All these people in some form or fashion are coming back because they realize that, one, this state provides you that stability. It's an inclusive state, right? It is a state that has a lot of opportunity, whether it's in the realty sector or whether it's in other sectors as well. I think the underlying strength of this state will ensure that all these laborers who have gone back, a large percentage of it will come back. The timing of it, I don't know if people can predict the timing accurately or not, but I'm absolutely confident that these people are coming back because of what the state has given and what the state currently offers to its to the workers.
Sanjay, I'm going to come to you. We've talked about the advantages of OMR. There has to be some negatives that need to be corrected. I think one of the big things is the traffic, right? The second thing is, I'm going to put the same question that I put to Gaurav earlier. When you choose a locality, which are the localities? Give us 4 or 5 localities along the OMR that you think have huge potential to meet this huge millennial demand that is coming up.
So answer your first question, Jeshi, on the traffic and one of the couple of the drawbacks. So traffic, yes, but see, if you look at the traffic, it's not through the day. The traffic is again split into the morning, evening traffic, just like in any other metropolitan city. Today, if you look at Delhi, Gurgaon, you look at Mumbai, you look at Whitefield, Bangalore, you look at any city, it has the same problem of the traffic. And the traffic is again managed, or the traffic density is very high in the morning when people are getting to work and getting out of work. So that is one part. Second part, I think one of the things that concern home buyers have is the connectivity of the water lines and the drainage and the sewerage lines, because that's something that keeps popping up every time that although even in Chennai we have water, but there's only one line for every building. It's not like every apartment is a separate line, but there's something that home buyers normally look at, the government water supply and the sewerage being connected to the CMW SSB, which is the body which runs the whole thing. So that, in my opinion, would be probably the 2 things that would be as negatives. Coming back to your other question on the locations. So the closest location to Chennai from the OMR, when you start off from Taramani, is probably Perangudi. That's where you have a lot of schools happening. You have, all of it developing. The first part connected to Taramani, connected to Velachery. So that's one part people would look at closest to Adyar, and probably sitting at capital value of almost about half of what Adyar today quotes, Adyar or Tiruvallur. So that's an attractive location. Going down again, Thoraipakkam, you look at the corridor, which is Thoraipakkam, Karapakkam, very well connected to Pallavaram through the radial road. That's the second corridor, which is extremely good. Third is your Sholinganallur, because Sholinganallur actually now has become the center of gravity for OMR, connecting Medavakkam on the western side and ECR on the eastern side. So that's one part, the third part. Fourth would be again your Navalur belt, which is the Siriseri, Navalur, and your Semincheri belt. So that's where you have a lot of IT happening. You have SIPCOT, large facilities of IT companies. So most of the working population that is working are in these 4 or 5 corridors: ELCOT, SIPCOT, Tidal Park, the World Trade Center, which has just come in. So wherever you have a large opportunity of workforce coming in, you already have schools coming. So that is where these are the 4 or 5 locations which most people prefer. And that's what we call the OMR 1. Say Taramani, like Gaurav pointed out, say Taramani to Navalur is where you have most of the buying happening. So that's a corridor which is most favored.
Also want to give me some benchmark pricing, per square foot, and maybe what ticket sizes are.
So if you look at the average price it's between 4,500 to 5,500 per square feet. That is the average pricing. Now, if you look at closer to city, if you look at Perangudi and things like that, Perangudi is in about, say, a 7,000 to 8,000 rupee pricing. As you go further down towards the corridor, the prices start, anywhere from the lower band at about, say, 4,000 rupees and a higher band of about 6,000 rupees. So that's kind of bandwidth on pricing. Ticket size, like I said, many of the developers today, including the ones we have, Gaurav and Arun would now and Rahul, be planning the new developments being on the ticket sizes. Earlier we had a per square foot, larger apartments coming in, but today it is more to do with the ticket size. So the first home buyer, can he afford to pay 50 lakh for a 2-bedroom? May not. So the entire design or the entire planning happens on what is it the buyer can afford to pay, and should we not cater to this segment, so that first home buyer of 30 to 50 or 30 to 60 lakhs, and then going to the next home, and then the third, which is going to be the 1 crore plus. So I think you have a lot of supply coming in, and all the planning that's happening is happening on this ticket sizes. So 30 lakhs, 25, 30 lakhs being at the bottom, and say at about 1.5 being on the top for the premium ones. Of course, you do have some projects which are even priced higher than that, but those are people who are looking at aspirational value, larger homes, a villa or something like that, which they can afford to pay a higher price.
I have a large number of questions coming. If you guys don't mind, let me throw the questions at you. Any of you can pick up the questions. There is, what about upcoming infrastructure? What all are in the pipeline, and anything specific to decongest the traffic? Would Gaurav, would you like to take that? Gaurav, you're on
You're
mute.
on mute. Gaurav, you're on mute.
So I think, what Arun mentioned, one of the largest defining characteristics of OMR will be the metro that is coming in, right? That will help decongest the area substantially, right? And so today, and whether it is metro, whether it is flyovers that are being built, that are being proposed to be built across multiple junctions, right? So I think today, those are the two factors that will probably decongest OMR in a big way, right? And also, actually, I would like to spin the OMR story on the traffic bit, right? Traffic of this nature actually shows you the underlying economic activity power of this strip. It only proves to go further that how many lives and livelihoods are getting built on this strip, right? So those are the two things that I would put forward as far as connectivity and traffic goes.
Also, just adding on to what Gaurav sir also said, the infrastructure, as he said, as he mentioned, metro rail is definitely going to be a big plus in terms of connectivity. That may be a few years down the line, but we can see the physical infrastructure in terms of drainage and water connectivity and all that is already almost in place, and there are talks about desalination water that is going to come in, it's going to solve all the problems. So I think there is better focus from the government on this OMR build, because obviously because of the IT sector and everything, they're building sports complexes in huge areas, and already there's a good social infrastructure in place. So I think from an infrastructure point of view, it has definitely grown leaps and bounds, especially in the past 5 to 7 years, because I could physically see the difference. And my father used to take me to the construction site about 7 years ago, and what I'm seeing right now, it's a big change in terms of infrastructure.
And that, I think, Shrikant, your question should be answered. He asked about the status of civic amenities like water, sewerage. When will it get fully connected for OMR residents? From what you are saying, the work is underway. What Sanjay said, what you're saying, the work is underway, and we should be seeing connectivity.
But any which ways, Jayashree, most of the developments in OMR are actually completely self-sufficient. So, whether it is STP, so when a consumer buys the product, he or she is anyways not exposed to the vagaries or the challenges of the infrastructure, because the developer is anyways completely fulfilling the requirement that any individual needs to live in a development happily. So there's no challenge on that front.
And I have another question. What are the kind of approvals that you require to check when you buy plots or flats in the OMR region? Just what all, it's like a checklist. When you buy a property, check on these few things. Plot, flat. Arun, you want to take that?
The checklist would obviously include primarily, comfort which the home buyer wants. What is the location? Whether it first and foremost is somewhere in the vicinity of the school, or he's got a school which he can put his child to, because that will become a biggest criteria. And OMR anyway fulfills, there's no problem at all. The second comes the basic social infrastructure, which everybody's spoken quite a bit in terms of, basic things available. Third is health, hospitals and so on and so forth. So this is the one level bunch of check regarding the location. The second check, no doubt, will be to ensure more or less all the banks have approved the project. See, every home buyer cannot really take his title papers. It could be a bunch of maybe 5 to 6 files, and there's no way he can go to a private advocate and engage him, etc. So the easiest check is for him to ensure this is more or less by and large approved by all the big financial institutions regarding home loan. So that's the second check. The third thing is obviously if he does have a competency or somebody known, etc., he can take the approvals papers to confirm whether the approvals are in line with what the builder intends to build. But the most important check, beyond all these things, is the builder's history. If you were to take the builder's history to do a little bit of check on what the builder is being spoken about in the internet, and what's broadly his reputation in terms of timeline of completion, in terms of any prior practice which possibly could hamper his image and so on and so forth. These are the few checks. If he does, he doesn't have to worry. If today somebody comes to a Bhagyam or a Casa Grande or a Android, I know really are not worried about this is title going to be messed up. Have they got the approvals properly, etc. They might, by and large, just be checking whether these guys are delivering better on time. Are their qualities in line with what they have committed? Is what they're showing in the nice, rendered pictures being, recreated in the actual building? These are the broad checks. So these are the few checks which he might want to do. Otherwise, I mean, the practices have become so good. And I would believe the integrity of any of the grade A, grade B builders used to be so high in South. I'm not even saying Chennai, South, Hyderabad, Bangalore, Chennai, that actually home buyers are not worried about all this otherwise integrity and those kind of issues. It's about broad check, including choosing the location, just ensuring all the banks are in place, the builder's history is right through which a lot of other things get ratified. And if you want to dig one level deeper, maybe take the approval papers and go to an expert. But these are the broad 4-5 checks.
Sanjay, I'm going to ask you about investment. At one point of time, investors drove residential markets. They have more or less stepped away from the markets. Do you see investment coming back into real estate? I have a question saying certain localities for the last 5 years, price movement has been the worry. It hasn't moved up sufficiently. So the difference between a under construction project and a ready to move in project, the price differential has not been as high as it used to be earlier. Will investors come back?
So looking at the Chennai market, Jayashree, it's always been a non-speculative market. So you had more of end users buying it. It was not so much to do with buying in the beginning and selling in the last. So 80 to 85% of the buyers who get into a project would either buy it for their own purpose or for a future use. It was not to speculate to buy it in the beginning. Coming to the second question, where over the last, say, 3 to 5 years, the appreciation has been, so that's across India, the appreciation on residential real estate has been, I wouldn't say not there, it's been comparatively lesser than what it was in the first 5 years of this decade. The 2010 to 2015, the appreciation was much higher. 15 to 20 is a little muted. And that is because of various other factors. There's nothing to do with the real estate, as such. So you look at the stock market, you look at every segment which has gone through these cycles. So my guess on residential real estate is, it is something which is more necessity driven, right? So in the long term, and people could, it's not 3 to 5 years, but when you invest in residential real estate, you look at a slightly larger cycle. You look at a 5 to 10 year, certainly there's going to be an appreciation. Certainly corridors which are driving demand because of the sheer number of people moving in there. So when you have more and more people employed in that corridor, whichever corridor it may be, is manufacturing, whether it is IT, that is bound to appreciate. So it could be a blip for maybe 3 to 4 years or 3 to 5 years, and the current context this year maybe. But going forward, I don't see this appreciation not being there. Typically, a residential real estate would appreciate by about 5 to 7% per annum. That's the thumb rule. And if you look at being invested for a period of, say, 8 to 10 years, you're certainly going to see an investment appreciation. But from the home buyer's perspective, when the home buyer is buying it, he's not buying it as an investment. He's buying it because it's more of a need. And if and when they resell the property, maybe after 5, 7, 10 years, that is when the residual appreciation kicks in.
Yeah, no doubt. Actually, a CAGR of about 5 to 7% over a long time for sure is there in real estate. But I'll tell you, a lot of other returns are there. Otherwise, people are not seeing. One is only in a home buying. There is a scope of leverage. For example, you want to buy a 2 lakh worth of shares. You cannot say I'll pay 20,000, give me 90,000 from bank and go invest it. Here in this case, you have an opportunity to leverage. You have 2 lakhs, you can buy a 20 lakh home. You have a 4 lakh, you can buy a 40 lakh home, or whatever around that kind of a price rate. Percentage. One. Second is actually there's a huge IT benefit, income tax benefit, be it in terms of interest set-offs and the principal set-offs, which is there, which is also clearly a 1.5% yield per annum, and that's no small number. Third thing is actually there's opportunity for the rental. If you're staying in the house, you would be otherwise paying a rental, right? So that's about a 2 to 2.5% yield. So if you sum up a 7% to 1.5% and add the 2% rental yield, income tax thing, it already comes to close to 10%. And the bigger advantage of home buying, I'll tell you what, no normal household will have such a disciplined saving of 30, 40, 50,000 rupees a month. You can call it interest or whatever, because it's interest because you're not you didn't have the money. Otherwise, you would have, obviously, otherwise, where will you have a discipline to save 30, 40, 50,000 rupees of EMI? That discipline will not come, right? You ask those people to say, pay a systematic investment plan of 25,000, 20,000. After 4th month, 20 of the households will drop out of every 100. So the disciplines will not happen if it's not for home buying. So home buying, today, earlier the returns were 20%, 25% in terms of growth. Today, it could be in the range of, I agree, 7% to 9%. 5 to 7 might not be the number. I would think when one more boom happens, it could be 7 to 9%. But add up income tax benefits, add up rental advantages, add up the disciplines of saving so much amount of money every year, through repayments as EMI. This is one of the biggest reasons why, with all the hype which the stock market does and the mutual fund talks about their own industry, the people come to throng and buy homes. They know that.
Today, and Arun, building on what you were saying, right? Today, if you see the investment cycle, right? India is probably oscillating between, say, close to 7% rate of interest, when you're getting almost a 2.5-3% return on rental and a 7% rate of interest from the government of India or from the banks, right? Your cost of ownership is down to 4%. On a 4% arbitrage, you have the option of buying and owning an asset. So that sort of a return is, according to me, it becomes a no-brainer choice to go forward and invest in a home today.
And I think we are all talking about this not because we are all from the real estate fraternity, etc. That's a fact. And home buyer understand that.
No, anybody can do the math. No, we don't need to do the math. The math is in front of you.
The mutual funds and the stock markets will have to sell them. The real estate as a concept or investment is sold well in the country for the last 40 years. That is why people still come back to buy. But no doubt, those multi returns which used to happen might not happen going forward. But it's still a very respectable investment which is safe. The value doesn't erode in one day. You're not panicking seeing a 40 lakh house drop to, because even if it drops a little, you don't even have visibility because you're not trying to sell it. At least you can be at peace. You're not getting heart attacks. That's the reality of housing in real estate. Fact.
Okay, a final, I'm going to,
Just adding on to Arun sir and Gaurav sir's points, obviously they have clearly explained how, what the return and how better the return is going to be in real estate. I would just like to add that, as Gaurav sir also previously mentioned, home buying is more tied to emotion, and right now in this current situation, everyone is realizing the importance of home. So I think even from the emotional point of view, investment in real estate is definitely good that everybody wants to do. That's another point that I want to make.
And a final round of my final question to all of you. Do you think the government has done enough? Is there something that you need from the policymakers so that this industry can go forward? Gaurav?
Okay. I think if we were to draw a list of what is needed from the policymakers, right? A couple of things that are needed, right? One is, I think there is some appreciation in the government today that the kind of employer that the real estate industry is, right? But if they were to take complete cognizance of the kind of impact this business has, where it is touching, almost 250 industries, ancillary industries, where a person makes a home, from a curtain to sand, right? Those are the number of industries that, say, when a person buys a home, gets touched in the process, right? So once the government has complete appreciation for it, they will understand that probably incentivizing buyer demand today is one of the most critical things. And buyer demand is where, it is nudging. All they need to do is nudge the buyer where they understand that this is a safe investment today, whether it is in terms of providing them income tax benefits to the customer, whether it is the government has already provided GST benefits to the customer, to the end customer, right? And of course, ITC to the developer. Input credit tax that was taken away from the developer, I think, was not necessarily a very friendly move, because it leads to unnecessary escalation of cost for the end consumer, because that is something that should be reversed. But I think input tax credit today and incentivizing the end buyer to make a purchase, whether there's an income tax benefit or whether it is rate of interest benefits, I think will go a long way in ensuring that the kind of employment that this business generates, it continues to control and operate in that same dominant way that it has done in the past.
So what you're saying is incentivize the consumer, tip the fence-sitters, make them buy today, because that is, it is also the need of the hour. Rahul, what does policy need to do?
Yeah, I mean, several policies that have been implemented so far is actually moving in the right direction. I think the implementation of RERA and everything, there's more transparency and everything in real estate. So there have been several good aspects. Obviously, there are it's still a long journey that needs to be completed, because obviously we're facing some issues in terms of this input tax credit and everything being a little bit of a loss to us. But again, I think the government is probably doing the right thing and trying to solve the problems one at a time. And also the builders are very much united together, and we represent various issues through trade bodies like CREDAI and everything, who take issues up to the government, and also the government also responds and tries to do whatever best they can. With the recent clarifications regarding stamp duties, everything, there are some savings that the builders actually get. So yeah, it's still a long journey. There are a lot of things that needs to be done, regularized, and needs to be done better. But yeah, I think we are slowly getting there. So I'm just being more optimistic on policy.
What would you like to see, Arun? What would you like to see from the policymakers? In fact, would you also like to address the issue where many bankers and government people have said that prices should drop? Should prices drop? Will prices drop? What does policy need to do if prices have to drop?
I get a little shocked. Every builder's books are visible to the market. A lot of the big guys are already public. Everybody's operating on a single digit. The bankers are operating on a double digit. Okay. And the bankers are very conveniently saying, drop the pricing. Drop the pricing where? To offer, make a margin of 7-8%. A prestige margin is about a 9%. A brigade's margin is about a 8%. Will they drop down to what? 4%, 3%? So let them possibly mind their business. We'll mind our business. We've never gone and asked bank. And that's, they have never dropped any interest rates. Let them drop the interest rates. What are they going to say? Oh, it's not viable for us. Our spread is very small. Oh, so it's viable for us alone. So it doesn't work that way. So pricing drop, etc. is all far-fetched for people to do. Then, anyways, all of us are disciplined because how the market is treating us. So we are operating in a very logical, wafer-thin margin, and we are fine with that. We don't have complaint with that. We are not complaining pre-COVID, right? COVID scenario. Here, the only thing which we are saying as a support is what, it's going to be more from what Gaurav left, which is incentivize the home buyers, not because real estate has to do well and the home buyers have to buy. The economy has to do well means real estate has to do well. Because the real estate, residential and the commercial, etc. supports more than 250 allied industries. Okay, and the employment opportunities are huge if you were to see the cascading effect of what real estate development really has across the economy. Okay, for government, for its own good, for the percentage of people we employ, we would only request government, we don't want anything for ourselves, make the home cheaper. You have just been helping us to keep pushing the pricing in terms of GST, no ITC, and more regulatory issues like a RERA, which takes time, which is cost for us, and so on and so forth. Make it in any way cheaper possible, in every way cheaper possible to the home buyer. That's good for the economy, that's good for the home buyer, that's good for us, that's good for everybody. That's all is my submission. And this whole margin is, really a very unfair. It's like it's been going on for too long. They should drop the prices and sell. So I really think let them mind the business. We'll mind our business.
Sanjay, I'm going to come to you. Policy comments, but I also wanted to address two things that have come while the rest of them were talking. One is how does the depreciation work of residential property, and the second was the new formats that are coming up, co-living and so on. Post-COVID, what is the opportunity?
So on the policy part, it's only that if the government could reduce the stamp duty and registration charges, because today in Tamil Nadu, we are paying one of the highest in the country. So that is something that the buyers normally, when they're buying a new property, there's a lot of money that they're shelling out. And then registration, stamp duty again adds on to the cost. So that could be looked into. That would be great. One. The other part on the depreciation, see, like Arun said, it doesn't drop from a 40 lakh to a 20 lakh. the property doesn't depreciate. What happens? The percentage of increment slows down. So if the building ages and if it's not well maintained, if they don't have a professional maintaining it, and if the association is not cooperative enough, the appreciation in such buildings becomes slower. So if some other asset is appreciating at about a 7 to 8 or a 7 to 9%, some ones which are not being maintained properly tend to appreciate from between 2 to 3% or 4%. So that's where it is. So if the ownership lies on the building owners of the building, how they maintain it and how they ensure that the asset is maintained well, so that there is a substantial amount of increment which comes in. So that's on the second part that you asked. I'm not in the third part, Jayesh. You said something else as well.
Co-living, new formats like co-living, what are the possibilities?
So co-living is definitely going to stay. It is the way the millennials like Rahul would, sort of associate to. That is definitely going to stay. But what will happen in the co-living format? Earlier, the density was much higher. So today, with the current situation, that if they're de-densifying the co-living, just like the de-densification happening in offices, to more space, social distancing. So the number of beds that were going into co-living earlier was much more dense. Now it's going to be much lesser in terms of dense. And the other thing that you asked was, what are the new formats which are? The new formats now, considering that a lot of people are spending time working from home, is to ensure in the design itself that there is a corner earmarked, there is a extra space which is created. Like earlier in our design, we used to have a puja room, for example. There was a storeroom. So definitely a work from home corner is going to be designed so that in the home itself, you have a dedicated space where people can use as in when they work from home. And that is something that is being implemented. Some of the developers that we work closely with have also started creating many office cubicles within the clubhouse or within the common areas where they have, so that if a person is confined to his home and is working, specifically an IT corridor, any other corridor, they can step out of the home, go into the clubhouse or go into a secluded area, and then they can still continue doing their work from there. So that's a new format. The third thing that is coming across as a new format is combining a co-living, co-working, and complete ecosystem in one building where you have a working and a living environment created. Some of the operators, in fact, contemplating how they can merge the co-living and co-working into one unit and make sure that people are within that are working and staying there as well.
I've spent way more time than I had allocated to this discussion, but with a panel like this, you can never stop, right? But I think somewhere we have to stop. And thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me. That was a
Pleasure.
really invigorating discussion. And I think the consumers have benefited. Going by the number of queries that are coming up, I can see that consumers have been engaged. They're listening to you. They are actually absorbing what you're saying. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Jayesh.
Jayesh. Thank you, everyone.
You guys.
Bye.
See you, Arun. See you, Sandeep.
Yeah,
See you,
Bye.
Rahul.
Bye, Gaurav, Varun.
Bye.
Bye, Rahul.
Bye.